Hey everyone, I wanted to make a behind the scenes video for the Across the Spider-Verse video. Here's how I made it. This was the first scene I animated. For this recreation, I wanted every scene to match as closely as possible to the original TV spot. I hadn't seen the movie yet, so I tried to make it look like New York train sequence thing. For this, I had Miles be the central focus with a bunch of street lamps and billboards passing with a colored ring sequence. I also dropped in a blue/green mesh in the background. This was new because I used a Blender add-on Mechaface for mouth animation in the video for Miguel in this sequence. I struggled with this scene here and the other one for a couple of days trying to get the lighting and atmosphere to match the original just right. Miles and Miguel both had a whole lot of different lights illuminating them. This shot is a close-up of Miguel with Scarlet, Miles, and Unlimited with numerous other Spider-Men in the background. I created Unlimited with a base of black suit Spider-Man and created decals to match him closely as possible. A common theme among the background Spider-Man was that they all had a red spider you could see, so I used a black suit Spider-Man and created a red version of his spider for them. This scene was a lot of fun. I had a general idea of how I would do this one. I had Miles standing surrounded by all these Lego antenna and web pieces. I exported them out of Mechabricks, and then when I added them in Blender, I added a red glowing emission to make them stand out. This is one of my favorites. I love how the camera follows the web in this shot. I had no idea how I was going to do this scene originally. I used the same antenna and web pieces for this one. However, I had two sets, one red and one blue. I exported both of them so I could keyframe and mask the webs turning from blue to red in Adobe After Effects, where I also created the background for this. During the scene, there are a few frames where it turns to black and white. I animated these frames in Blender and hopped in Adobe Illustrator to create frames in the same style by tracing over them. To keep it with true LEGO fashion, I wanted Miles' Venom Bite to be composed of LEGO lightning pieces. For this one, I created a room similar to the one in the TV spot and then added a bright orange light at the bottom to match the original scene. Here, Miguel is running after Miles. When I was watching the footage back, I noticed he kind of swings his arms far, which I wanted to match with this. I have his arms out of socket and a bit farther than I normally would animate. This close-up of Miguel is where I used Mechaface for the first time to do mouth animation in the video. It was a short amount of dialogue, but a good learning experience. Miguel and Lila both have all sorts of lights hitting them with the mesh in the backdrop. Lila has a box of lights hitting her to give her that glowing hologram effect she has in the movie. This was the other scene where I struggled for a while trying to get the lighting just right. This went through 3 different versions in total. I also used a lot of different Spider-Man minifigures on Mechabricks for this one. This entire sequence took a bit to animate and render. The hardest part for me was trying to figure out the setting and how to animate it. In the first scene here, I created one row and then duplicated it a couple of times and keyframed it moving. The helicopter is from the Iron Man Malibu Mansion Attack by Stas on Mechabricks. Miguel jumps really fast in the scene, and for that, I created different pieces with this headpiece in front to give the illusion of smear frames. I reused them here for a few frames before using the minifigure again. I created the set for this one by adding more depth to the scene I had created beforehand. I had to replay the clip multiple times to see how it was laid out. I used some of the buildings from San Francisco by Dr._Loftstrand, New York City by Stas, Singapore by Steven3321 for the scene. I made some adjustments and added a few pieces and scaled them up in Blender. I used a whole lot of different lights that moved with the buildings. I then did the lighting and rain effects in Adobe After Effects. For the light and strike effect, I followed a tutorial on YouTube by Some Dudes Films by using a plugin by Video Copilot. Similar to scene 4 of Miles, there's a few frames with different colors. I did this in After Effects by changing the colors and messing with the hue and saturation and black and white effect. A couple of different elements were used in this sequence. I created the sides of the building and scaled them up, and then I made the building/floor. The glass that he breaks through was another element. The beams in the back were made and the spider people were put on them. And then finally, Miles running from a few spider people with Miguel chasing after him. This scene doesn't feature as many as in the official clip. Here, I animated 7 different spider people running one at a time with Miguel leaping after Miles. My favorite part from this is Miles jumping through the glass. I created the glass together in a row and then keyframed it breaking with him jumping through it. This was one of my favorite sequences to animate. This one is composed of spider people with a mesh background in the shape of an octagon and Lego beams. This one, like the previous one, features a whole lot of spider people. I had to reanimate Miles a couple of times as he jumped from beam to beam just to get it right. The camera had to be adjusted a lot throughout this one to make sure it stayed close to Miles. I also animated spider people chasing him in all different directions. I was very happy with the text that goes behind Miguel in this sequence. That was fun to do. I had a general idea of how I would do this one. The animation of him putting his mask on turned out great. I had to figure out how I was going to do the colorful shapes and lighting. I decided to use colored pane glass bricks to form the shapes. I added a light behind the glass, and then I duplicated and flipped it and put it on the other side to illuminate Miles. Similar to the lightning strike jump, I scaled up some LEGO architectural buildings for this sequence. This shot looks much different compared to the original scene. My original idea was to use a bunch of LEGO modular buildings for this scene, but I ran into issues as the set was too large and I could not properly light it due to limitations. I'm still very happy with how the sequence turned out. I again used the antenna and web pieces, built up some of the slanted webs, and then had them all fall and turn into the LEGO lightsaber piece. This shot here was two different layers. The background was a circular piece with a red piece that was copied and pasted and then duplicated and adjusted for different angles. I animated Miguel with mecha face and added in lighting for him and the background, and then exported both separately. The background and Miguel on a transparent background so I could just drop him in there. He rendered very fast. Here's the original version of the first scene. In the second version, I created the texture for the portals in Photoshop and painted a rectangle orange and pink with different hues and then exported them and added the texture into Blender. I then added an emission effect to the portals to make them glow. This was the first scene where the Spider-Man face rig was used to make Miles' eyes squint. I then animated him in the portals. For scene 2, I reused the portals from before but rearranged them and then had the camera zoom in. For both scenes, I added additional effects in Adobe After Effects. The background is a fractal noise effect with hue and saturation dropped on it with additional color with a slight blur. The background for scene 1 was tilted to the side to add in perspective. For the brief second where the portal and Miles changed to a bluish color, that was done by using a change to color effect. I added in another fractal noise for the bright light and added in a white solid for a fade. I created the buildings to match as close as possible to the original scene, then scaled them up. The camera movement was animated first. Next, I animated Miles' eyes and then his movements. Finally, the webs were animated. The sky backdrop was added in Adobe After Effects. The background image was taken by Paul Berthleon Bravo on Unsplash. Originally with this scene, I wanted the building to be at an angle like it was in the original. I decided when animating to just have it be them jumping out the side instead of having the camera show more of the building. The roof behind them collapses with some LEGO bricks falling for a few frames. I added in colored smoke in Adobe After Effects. This was broken up into a few different layers. Number 1, the sky. Number 2, Miles saving the people. Number 3, frames of just the building. Number 4, smoke effects. And finally, number 5, Miles and the people mid-air. This scene has 2099, Jessica, and Scarlet in the rain. I created the face decal for Jessica in Adobe Illustrator. I took inspiration for her goggles from Bumblebee from DC. I built a set and added a dark background to be the night sky. The figures were adding in next. Jessica was the first one animated with 2099 being the second and Scarlet being the third. I then reused the portals from the previous scene again and animated those. The welcome text was added behind the three of them. I changed the color and added an emission light to the scene. With additional lights to light them in the night sky, the scene was then put together in layers in Adobe After Effects. The background was first, then the portals were animated again, making them fade after a while. Next, the three of them walking, I added in the rain effect and changed it to the color red to match the welcome sign and lighting. The train was composed of a few plates that were copied and pasted. The rings and street lamps around them were scaled up and all keyframed to show them moving. I animated 2099 and added in a few frames to show the spark effect when he moves his arm up. Text was also added in the background too. This scene used a lot of different lights to show the change in lighting. I then zoomed in with the camera. I reused the plates here and rotated them for the background and added in Miles and Miguel and added movement for his hair. Here, I lowered the camera and reused the train plates and added in rings with a slight rotation to them and animated Miles. I animated Miles kicking Miguel from the side with the background's colors changing fast from teal, green, to orange. The rings and signs and lamps were used again. I built the buildings to match Vision's Academy and scaled them up some. I animated Miles to match his movements in the original clip, and finally, I animated his web. Alrighty, time for a Q&A. Question 1. How long did it take you to make? I started working on the video on May 15th with the first shot of Miles with all the traffic going behind him with the close-up, and then I finished the video on June 29th with the last shot being Miguel, Scarlet, and Jessica walking in the rain. This video took probably about roughly 30 to 40 hours in total to complete from editing, rendering, effects, and building the sets. I had a lot of fun working on this video, and along the way, I learned a lot of new techniques. Question 2. What were the most challenging frames to make / edit? The scene of Miles with the spider people behind him, I struggled trying to get the lighting just right for this one. The helicopter sequence was a little tough mainly because the helicopter, I had to make sure there was just enough room between the helicopter and then the pilots that Miguel was rescuing. And then when he was landing with them, I had to kind of eyeball it to make sure he was like on the ground and not floating midair. The scene with Miles climbing away from all the different spider people. For this, I had to keep track of the movements of all the different spider people. Another was making sure the camera followed Miles as he went from bottom to top to climb away. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any more questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments and I will be more than happy to reply and answer them. Also, I do plan to do even more Blender animations with some stop motions and behind the scenes videos as well. I'll see you guys next time, and goodbye.